Give me just like a breakdown of like the origin story behind VBA, behind Fastbreak Labs, and then we can kind of get into the project and get deep down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. So um, VBA was really born off of just like my personal interest in Zedrun, actually. In that, basically, I was watching this horse racing game, being like, people really love horses, but you know what? Like my favorite sport growing up was it's basically basketball, right? And so like for me, it was if people are willing to spend and invest like thousands of dollars and their time in this like fictional horse racing universe, the same thing will definitely exist for people who love basketball and sports. And so Fastbreak Labs as a company basically was formed under, okay, if we have this thesis in Web3 around like what happens when you give ownership to people, and what happens in like a sports context, then Fastbreak Labs here is to create brand new experiences for those people. And VBA, because basketball was our favorite sport, just became the first concept that we started with.
Interesting. So, one of my biggest questions here as we kind of go forward, people watch horse racing not necessarily maybe for the horses, whereas in the NBA, I feel like they're watching specifically to watch LeBron James. And how do you bring that into
Mm-hmm.
virtual reality, where maybe you can't get that IP from the NBA yet, where you have to create these virtual worlds and with simulated players? How do you make an immersive experience that people want to be involved in
Yeah,
without a LeBron James or a Yao Ming, like you said, that got you involved
that
early on?
that's a fantastic question, and I'm just going to touch on my personal experience playing fantasy sports, if that works here. I remember I played fantasy football, I think probably starting in like middle school. And I was not a Tom Brady fan before, but I remember one year, I think it was like when he had 50 touchdowns, I had Tom Brady in my fantasy team. And I didn't really know that much about him. I mean, maybe that just shows how much I didn't know, but ever since that year, like he'd been basically my favorite player since then because of how he carried my fantasy team. And so we think that like once you have like an ownership stake in something, that you start to draw a personal connection with it and you will start to root for it. It's like today basically like how many people can name more than like 10 or 15 players beyond like the superstars? It's very few, right? And so but we do think that people who do play fantasy will like automatically build this connection with all these other players that they never heard of before. And we think the same thing can happen with what we're building with the BBA.
That's a really cool topic of conversation. I think in order to have like a deeper combo, though, let's just talk about VBA and what you guys are doing, like specifically from a user perspective. So just give me like the elevator pitch for VBA, and we'll jump into like what the mint looks like, I guess, at the end of the month, and then what season zero has in store for like potential users.
Yeah. So what VBA is a fantasy basketball manager game where people will be able to put together teams of five um, fictional NFT players that compete in games, tournaments, and leagues for Solana rewards. What it looks like really is we've built a simulator that basically takes into account all the attributes of these players and on a play-by-play basis basically outputs like Charles got a rebound or Joe got a block, et cetera, et cetera. And the sum of those plays that basically is the determination of the game. And so the game loop really is you trying to figure out who the best players are and trying to find like the best combination of guys that can help you earn the most like Solana rewards overall.
How does the gameplay work from like a visual perspective? Is it like Zed Run where there's maybe like a 30-second visual aspect, or does it just compute and then after 5 seconds you find out the winner and all the stats? How does that look from the user base perspective?
Yeah, so this we're going to experiment with. The starting experiment that we have is actually we built out a UI that looks and feels like an ESPN box score, like a play-by-play, effectively, right? And so what'll happen is this game will play out over the course of like 30 minutes or an hour, and you can tune in to watch certain bits of it, or you can tune in and watch the whole thing and just have it sort of as a ticker on the screen. The inspiration behind this is this is common fantasy basketball behavior, which is you sit on the couch, like you're watching TV, you want to see how your team is doing, so you check on your phone to see the score. You maybe watch a couple of plays, but you don't watch the whole game. And so that's the sort of experience that we're going after to begin with.